If you've ever dreamed of Los Angeles, the bright lights, the promises, the American dream, then perhaps there's one side of the city you've never truly seen. Just a few blocks from downtown Skid Row feels like a parallel world. More than 10,000 people live without stable shelter, reliable access to clean water, or sufficient restroom facilities gathered in less than 1 square mile. But this isn't just a poor neighborhood. It has become a living symbol, a reflection of how even a modern society can face profound challenges. Many of those here once had jobs. Some had families. Now all they have is a tarp, a sidewalk, and a fragile hope that tomorrow might be different. And the most sobering truth: sometimes it only takes one thing, a job loss, a sudden illness, or being left alone for someone to end up here. The real question isn't why are they living like this? But rather, how can our society work together to create meaningful and lasting change? Number 1. Skid Row is not an accident of history. Skid Row was never the result of a single unfortunate event. It is the product of a long series of decisions, some small, some systemic, that over time carved out a space often overlooked by the rest of the city. And perhaps the most important truth is not how it came to be, but how it has become a familiar part of the city's landscape. The story begins in the late 19th century, when Los Angeles became a growing hub for railroad expansion. Thousands of workers arrived in the city, most with little more than a suitcase and the will to work. Cheap boarding houses were quickly built near train depots to provide temporary shelter. Over time, these short-term settlements evolved into permanent enclaves for the working poor, what we now recognize as the early roots of Skid Row. By the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the number of people without stable housing soared. In California alone, hundreds of thousands were affected. Single-room occupancy hotels, small bare-bones units with no kitchens or private bathrooms became the last refuge for many. They were never meant for long-term living, but when society offered few other alternatives, temporary became permanent. From the 1960s through the 1990s, Los Angeles launched a wave of urban renewal projects. More than 7,000 low-cost housing units were demolished to make way for commercial developments and high-rise buildings. But those displaced were given few options. Many once again were funneled into Skid Row. In the 1980s and 1990s, budget cuts to social programs and community health services left fewer resources for people in need. Support systems were strained, while the number of people needing help continued to grow. Individuals who once worked, paid taxes, and were part of the city's foundation were slowly pushed out of view. So no Skid Row did not appear by chance. It stands as a reflection of how a society can veer off course through decisions that seem minor in the moment but compound into consequences that are now profoundly difficult to reverse. Perhaps the most significant part isn't that Skid Row exists, but that we have become accustomed to its presence. In silence, we may have allowed 100 years of complex challenges to become permanent. Number 2. Skid Row and the cascading urban collapse. What does daily life look like when basic infrastructure is overstretched? Skid Row offers a clear picture, a community navigating daily life amid a shortage of elementary necessities such as working bathroom facilities or reliable access to clean water. Journalism and public health reports have repeatedly emphasized the seriousness of this situation. For example, a 2017 joint audit revealed that only 9 public toilets served nearly 1,800 unhoused individuals overnight, far short of the minimum standards recommended for such a populated area. Such conditions create significant public health challenges. increasing the risk of community-wide health issues. Attempts to introduce hygiene relief, like installing hand-washing stations in early 2020, were important steps, though. Maintaining them long-term proved difficult when the provider removed 50 such stations, citing safety concerns. The impact of this strain extends far beyond hygiene. Without proper shelter, many endure exposure to the elements and live with untreated health conditions. One Skid Row cleanup operation in 2014 found over 100 individuals in need of immediate medical or mental health support. Add to that data showing that between 36 to 38% of residents struggle with serious mental health conditions, while many others live with physical disabilities or trauma. It's not only the residents who are affected. Local business owners, delivery drivers, and even emergency responders face daily difficulties. Deliveries are delayed. Medical emergencies become logistical puzzles. Every sweep, a city-led effort to clear encampments, can result in the loss of vital medications, personal documents, and the threads of dignity that keep someone anchored to their identity. The streets may appear cleaner, but the community's path to stability becomes more fractured. Every aspect of Skid Row's challenges, from strained sanitation infrastructure to gaps in healthcare access, exemplifies how isolated issues can compound over time. The real lesson isn't simply the sight of tents. It's how quickly hope and belonging can be affected when a city's most basic structures are under pressure. Number 3, aid system or bureaucratic maze. The city of Los Angeles has poured over $1 billion into addressing homelessness between 2020 and 2025. Yet despite the mounting figures on the budget sheets, the results have been modest. What makes it so challenging to turn funding into transformation? It costs more than $600,000 to build a single permanent housing unit in Los Angeles, and the process takes roughly 3 to 5 years from conception to habitation. Meanwhile, someone can slip into homelessness in as little as 3 weeks of job loss or financial shock. That contrast between long build times and immediate need underscores the fragility of the system. One of the most emblematic initiatives, Inside Safe, launched as a priority program to rapidly house people living in encampments. By mid-2023, it had moved over 1,300 individuals into interim or permanent housing. In total, about 4,300 people found housing during the first half of Mayor Bass's term. But dive deeper, and the complexities emerge as of late 2024. Only 23% of those placed in hotels through Inside Safe transitioned into permanent housing. Even more telling, less than 1% were classified as permanently housed by early 2023. The bureaucratic process doesn't help. Opening a single temporary shelter or transitional housing facility can require as many as 12 separate approvals, stretching up to 1 or 2 years to finalize. Consider the difficulty it takes nearly the same time to approve a shelter as it does for someone to become unhoused after a financial shock. Together, these barriers form more than a challenge, they form a bureaucratic maze. Funding is available, policies exist, but a labyrinth of approvals, extensive regulation, and slow construction processes all contribute to a system that spends heavily with limited return. The result: a system that struggles to deliver timely aid to its most vulnerable, not for lack of commitment, but due to layers of its own complexity. Number 4. A quiet reflection between Skid Row and Kensington. Though they sit on opposite coasts of the United States, Skid Row in Los Angeles and Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia mirror each other in sobering ways. It's not just the images of people sleeping along sidewalks under plastic tarps and makeshift shelters. It's the silence of a system that is still searching for effective solutions, a system that perhaps unknowingly has seen its most vulnerable pushed to the edges of the city. In Skid Row, nearly 10,000 unhoused individuals live within less than 1 square mile. Los Angeles has implemented well-intentioned policies like Housing First and Inside Safe to relocate people into temporary housing. Yet the scale of the problem continues to outweigh the results. Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia tells a similar story. Once a bustling working-class neighborhood, it's now home to an estimated 4,500 people living on the streets. Unlike Los Angeles, Philadelphia has taken a less centralized approach with fewer large-scale city-run interventions. In many ways, Kensington relies heavily on grassroots community efforts. Volunteers hand out meals and hygiene kits not because they are paid to, but because someone has to care. The core difference isn't in the number of people unhoused, it's in how each city chooses to respond. Despite these efforts, both places are caught in a difficult cycle. People lose their housing, find temporary relief, and often return to the street again. These aren't just addresses on a map. They were once homes, neighborhoods, communities. Now they're warning signs. Skid Row and Kensington are not reflections of personal character. They are reflections of systemic challenges. If society allows its most fragile members to remain on the margins, the light of our cities may dim along with the values we claim to stand for. Number 5. Skid Row. A warning. Echoing far beyond Los Angeles, Skid Row may be just a name on a map, but what's unfolding here speaks to something much larger, something that transcends city limits and national borders. This isn't just a story about housing or poverty, it's a reflection of what happens when a society struggles to see all of its people, and in doing so, risks weakening its own social fabric. As of 2024, Los Angeles reported over 75,000 individuals without stable housing, a rise of nearly 11% from the previous year. Even more telling, 13% of them had a full-time job and stable income just a year earlier. These aren't strangers to responsibility. They are former neighbors, co-workers' parents now on the margins of a system not always able to catch them. In response to this growing need, the city has redirected vast portions of its public budget to fund emergency programs. But this has created a difficult balancing act. Every solution aimed at one area can create new pressures elsewhere. Schools, healthcare, and public safety may feel the strain. The ripple spreads. What we are witnessing is no longer just a localized emergency, it's a national conversation. And perhaps it's time we stop asking how much more money we can apply to the symptoms and instead begin asking where the underlying challenges really started. Skid Row is not a reflection on those who live in it. It is the product of a system that struggles to reconcile growth with inclusion, expansion with equity. And the longer we accept that certain people can become invisible, out of sight, out of mind, the more fragile the foundation of our cities becomes. If Skid Row represents a shadow, then our collective awareness is the light that keeps it from growing. And if a modern society works to bring its most vulnerable out of that darkness, then that light will define us. Number 6. Quiet beacons of hope. In the middle of Skid Row's toughest streets, where the noise of daily struggle often drowns out compassion, there are quiet beacons of hope. They don't shout, they don't seek attention, but day after day, they show up, not with promises, but with presence. And in a place where everything seems temporary, that consistency is profound. Take the Midnight Mission, for instance, one of Los Angeles's oldest service organizations founded in 1914. Each day, the team prepares and distributes around 3,000 hot meals. But more than food, they offer dignity. Hot showers, clean clothes, job training programs and addiction recovery support. Its longtime leader, Clancy Imislund, once faced homelessness himself. His story of return and leadership is not just inspiring, it's a reflection of how lives can be rebuilt when someone believes in second chances. Then there's Lava Mae, a nonprofit that began in San Francisco and now serves Skid Row with mobile hygiene units. These former city buses are transformed into clean private shower stalls. As Lava Mae's team says, they're delivering radical hospitality. To date, they've provided more than 100,000 hygiene services nationwide, and for many people living on the street, this is the only time someone looks them in the eye, speaks their name, and sees them as human. In parallel, the tiny homes villages represent a new approach to transitional housing. These compact shelters, just 6 to 8 square meters in size, cost an average of $42,000 per bed, to build significantly less than traditional housing. They come with electricity locking doors and basic furnishings. More importantly, they offer something rare: safety and privacy. Residents describe sleeping through the night for the first time in years. According to a 2022 report from A-Mark Foundation, villages like these are also more scalable and cost-effective than large shelters. But beyond the programs and numbers are individuals who move quietly and selflessly. A former aerospace engineer now spends every summer afternoon handing out bottles of cold water. A retired nurse walks Skid Row once a week, carrying a first aid kit to clean wounds, offer bandages, and just as importantly, listen. These acts are not tracked in spreadsheets or government dashboards, but they're no less powerful. These efforts don't come from billion-dollar budgets or national mandates. They grow from empathy, from the belief that no one should be forgotten. That a simple gesture, a meal, a conversation, a safe place to sleep can restore the pieces of a life that once felt lost. And in these small, persistent acts of care, Skid Row becomes more than a place of hardship. It becomes a place where humanity still dares to show up. Number 7. Where quiet acts speak loudest. For every systemic gap left unaddressed, there are individuals and small organizations attempting to fill the silence not with speeches, but with small, steady actions. Skid Row, often portrayed as a symbol of difficulty, is also home to something more enduring: resilience in its quietest form. Among the lesser-known efforts is the organization called Chrysalis, which focuses on helping unhoused and low-income individuals re-enter the workforce. Unlike emergency shelters or soup kitchens, Chrysalis offers resume training, interview preparation, and job placement services tailored for people who've experienced long periods of instability. In 2023, alone, they helped over 1,500 individuals find employment in Los Angeles County. What makes efforts like Chrysalis unique isn't just the outcome, it's the approach. They treat job seekers not as cases to be managed, but as people with potential. Staff members themselves often have lived experience with homelessness or incarceration. This peer-based model builds trust where traditional systems have sometimes struggled. On the streets, these invisible threads of kindness continue. A local group of barbers offers free haircuts once a month to anyone who asks. For someone living outdoors, a haircut is more than grooming. It's dignity. It's being seen. Meanwhile, artists and musicians who once lost everything now return to Skid Row to perform at outdoor community events organized not by the city but by residents themselves. These are small gatherings, nothing grand, but they breathe life into a space where joy can feel out of place. While these grassroots efforts may not change policy overnight, they create something more: immediate connection. And in places like Skid Row, connection is a currency often more valuable than shelter. The story unfolding here is not just about urban challenges or systemic gaps. It's about the resistance of the human spirit in the face of those challenges. Every meal handed out, every story heard, every name remembered, it chips away at the silence. Because in the absence of large-scale answers, the smallest gestures continue to speak the loudest. Skid Row is not an unfamiliar story. It's a quiet reminder of the things we so easily forget. Compassion, a sense of shared responsibility, and the presence of people who live on the margins of society. From a past shaped by policy challenges to the cycles of bureaucratic complexities and the silence that lingered over time, all of it has slowly pushed a part of the population into the shadows where not everyone is willing to look. And yet, even in that darkness, there are glimmers of light, a hot meal handed to someone in need, a simple check-in during the heat of summer, or a tiny home offering someone their first sense of safety in years. These small, quiet gestures still carry the power to rebuild hope. If this story gave you something to reflect on, please leave a like and subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary so we can continue bringing you stories that matter, stories that deserve to be seen.